It's well known. It's a well-known issue that African Americans, black people in America, so-called, don't know their history, that they're cut off from the history of Africa, and even the history of everything that they did and everything that was done to them in America. That's why you have Black History Month, right? So this is something that everyone knows about. Everyone is aware of this issue. But the truth is that so-called white people don't know their history either. Their history in America or their history in Europe. Americans generally don't know history, which is incredibly useful when you consider the fact that history repeats itself. It's incredibly useful to keep the entire population in a state of amnesia, so that the whole country operates like the main character in that film Memento, you know? So you keep doing the same things that you've always done, and you never understand that you're actually doing the things that history has already judged to be crimes. You understand?
Wagwan, Grand Rising Kings and Queens from Africa and across the ocean. Now, today's video, I'm reacting on a clip from this man that we love, the man that always talk the truth, and his name is Shahid Bolsen. Now, there's some things Shahid Bolsen said, and I thought it's better that I'll share with you, because he talked about the issue that African Americans, black people in America, they don't know their history. And yes, we know that they were denied, they were stripped of their history, and even the history for everything that they did and everything that was done to them in America. But they came up, they grew up, and they built their own history again, their own culture. But Shahid went ahead and said that America does not have history too. The white people don't know their history either. He talked about that. And a lot. It's just a reflection of critics' historical amnesia in America, and it hits deeply for both black and white Americans. This speech that I'm going to share to you, it exposes how the system deliberately disconnects people from their historical context and allow oppression, racism, and injustice to repeat without accountability. And it is rooted in a pan-African, anti-racist, and colonial thoughts. So, the main key points that I'm going to talk about, or we are going to listen, is that black people are disconnected from their true history. White people also don't know their real history. America operates in amnesia, like the film Memento. Do you know that? Memento. Memento is a movie where the main character can't remember anything. He's stuck in a circle of repeating harmful actions without knowing it. And that's what America does. Repeat cruel immigration policies, repeat wars for profit, repeat racism and segregation in new forms like mass incarceration, repeating economic exploitation, and etc. and etc. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I want you to stay tuned, but I want you to watch this clip first from Shahid Bolsen. Very intelligent guy. Let's watch this, and then we come back with more commentary.
You can do it as if there's no context, as if there's no history, as if there's no pattern. That's the whole point of approaching current events from an ahistorical perspective. You don't want anyone to see the pattern. You want to be able to do things that have already been condemned by history, but you want to keep doing them anyway, as if you don't know that they're contemptible. You don't know that they are condemned actions. Just like Donald Trump now invoking the Alien Enemies Act in reference to mass deportations and so on. Okay, this is the same act that put tens of thousands of Japanese Americans into internment camps in World War II, and for which the United States government eventually had to provide compensation and eventually had to even apologize for doing it. You see, it is something completely contemptible that you did, but you want to repeat it. So you forget your history. You forget history so you can repeat history without blame. Both so-called white people and so-called black people in America don't know their history. Both have been told lies about the past, about their respective pasts. And the only reason for that is for the purpose of maintaining the continuity of the contemptible reality of how that society operates. Amnesia and fictional histories serve as a preventative measure against change, against reform, against rehabilitation. America chooses to live like it's in the movie Groundhog Day. You know, you pretend that only today exists over and over and over again. And because of this forced amnesia, because of this deliberate suppression of historical awareness, the people in America don't even recognize when they're reliving their own past. They think that they're facing something new. They think that they're responding to some unprecedented crisis every time. If you have no recollection where the road leads that you're on, then you'll keep walking it again and again, never realizing that it has already led you into disaster after disaster, dozens of times before. And this is exactly the condition that the rulers in America want, that the elite of America want, not just for black people, not just for so-called white people, but for everyone. Because the most effective way to ensure that a crime continues is to make sure that it is never recognized as a crime. To make sure that every time you commit that crime, it feels like the first time. You know? So when Trump talks about invoking the Alien Enemies Act, most Americans don't hear the echoes of history from that. They don't hear the voices of the Japanese Americans who were dragged from their homes and put behind barbed wire for years and years. They don't remember that that country had to apologize for doing exactly what they're about to do again. The American mind resets every morning, and that's the perfect condition for those in power. Because if people really understood history, then they would recognize that nothing about the American system is accidental. Every aspect of it, from its racial hierarchies to its economic disparities to its unjust foreign policies, is simply the continuation of an old script, a script that has played out again and again, always leading to oppression, always leading to exploitation, always leading to war, always leading to misery. And this is why in America history isn't taught. Fiction is taught, legends are taught, myths are taught, but not history. Because real history would be dangerous. Real history would break the illusion and potentially break the cycle. So-called white people in America know a version of history. They know a story. They know a narrative that has been carefully crafted to shape how they see themselves, how they see their ancestors, how they see their nations and their place in the world, and how they see everyone else. And this ignorance, this deliberate miseducation that they have imposed upon their own people allows the same crimes to continue. What most white people in America and Europe believe about their history is not history at all. It's mythology, designed to produce a specific kind of person, a person who does not feel guilty, a person who does not feel accountable, a person who does not feel responsible for ever changing anything because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're taught that their ancestors were pioneers, their ancestors were explorers and builders of civilization, that they've brought progress and democracy and enlightenment to the world. They hear about the Renaissance, they hear about the Industrial Revolution, they hear about the Age of Discovery, and so forth and so on. And not about enslavement, not about genocide, not about the theft, not about the destruction that their people are responsible for. They're not taught that their prosperity was built on unimaginable suffering. They're not taught that their systems of government, their financial empires, their very sense of national identity are all rooted in exploitation. They don't know about the crimes. They don't know the real legacy of their people. And so they don't change. They don't have to change because they don't even realize what they need to correct. You know, when we look at colonialism, for example, the history that's taught in Western schools is usually an abstraction. Colonization is framed as something that it just sort of happened a long time ago, you know, something that was maybe unfortunate, but it was inevitable, and it represented progress, and there were many beneficial things to come from it. Never mind the millions of Africans who died in the Congo Free State under King Leopold. Most white Americans have never heard of them. Never mind the Bengal famine of 1943 when millions of Indians starved to death due to British policies. They don't even know about it. The fact that the American police forces evolved from slave patrols, they don't know about that either. And they're not any more informed about the ongoing crimes, like the pillage of African resources today, the economic neocolonialism that keeps entire regions of the world impoverished, the exploitation of labor in the global South. These aren't relics of history. That's the present day reality of what your people are doing. But the story that white people are told does not include those realities, or else it packages those realities deceitfully and dishonestly. They package them dishonestly and deceitfully in the past just like they do now. The irony is that when they're confronted with the truth, many of these people will react defensively, you know. I didn't do that. That was in the past. Why should I feel guilty? But this reaction in and of itself reveals how little they're really understanding. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility. You know, if a person inherits a stolen house, they may not have stolen it themselves, but they still live in it. And if they refuse to acknowledge where that house came from or how it came into their possession, if they insist that that house is rightfully theirs because the crime happened a long time ago, well, then they're complicit because the theft is ongoing. The crime never really stopped. So when people don't know their history, they cannot recognize when history is repeating itself and when history is actually just a continuum into the present. This is why so-called white people in America can watch their government arm and support genocide in Gaza, bomb Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and so on, and actually believe when they say it's for the purpose of security. They don't see the colonial mindset at work. That's why they can see corporations, for example, Western corporations, strip mine Africa for resources and not connect that to the centuries of plunder that came before. This is why they can hear about mass incarceration, about police brutality and systemic racism in the United States, and not understand that these are not new problems. These are just new forms of an old system. These are new manifestations of the same system. And this is why they don't resist, why they don't challenge the structures that continue to exploit and continue to oppress, because they don't even recognize those systems as continuations of the age-old exploitation and oppression. The truth is, white people have been colonized too, not physically, not economically, but psychologically. They've been conditioned to believe in a history that never happened, a history where they were always the heroes, a history where they were never the villains, and where their victims were villains. And as long as they live inside that fiction, well, they'll continue to perpetuate the same crimes of their past, even without realizing it. Which just means that we're not even talking about past crimes. We're talking about ongoing crimes from the past until today. Like I said, it's a continuum. If there's ever going to be any real change, if there's ever going to be any hope for justice, then so-called white people have to actually learn your history. Not the history that makes you feel proud and makes you feel good, that makes you feel comfortable, but real history, the history that makes you uncomfortable, the history that you've denied all this time. And only when white people know their real history, really know it, then maybe they can begin to take the first steps towards repairing the damage that that history caused, the damage that it caused to millions upon millions of people all around the world, including themselves. I mean, Americans, particularly so-called white Americans, you're all like the child of the BTK killer, trying to come to terms with the fact that you were raised by a monster who you always thought was a good and upright man. If Americans in general really understood their history, well, they would know that the United States government has only ever used fear as a weapon against them. And every war that America has ever been involved in was only justified by lies. And every act of domestic repression has only ever been framed as being necessary for the sake of security. They would know that the anti-immigration movements, the anti-Muslim ban and so forth, and all of their surveillance programs, it's not new. It's the same thing. It's just rebranded versions of old crimes. There's absolute continuity. And the only reason that you don't know that is because you have no actual understanding of your own history. Yes, if Americans truly understood their history, they would not be so easily manipulated. They would not be so easily controlled. They would not be so quick to repeat the wrongs of the past, or rather to continue the wrongs of the past. But that's exactly why history is hidden from them. I mean, it's trite but true. There is nothing more powerful than knowledge. There's nothing more dangerous to a corrupt system than a population that remembers. And that's why our mission must be to educate people and to awaken people and to reconnect people with the reality of their own history, the good and the bad. Because when you understand your history, then you'll understand your enemy, because they've been doing the same thing throughout history. And when you understand your enemy, then you'll understand how to defeat them. You'll understand how to oppose them, because you've got an enemy who keeps you in a state of amnesia and a state of fake implanted memories. You know, every time you open your eyes, Your enemy is right there in front of you telling you that he's your friend. And because you don't remember anything, you believe him. You understand? The whole country is getting their drink spiked. Everyone in that country is getting roofied. And the one who spikes your drink and the one who abuses you when you're in your numb and unconscious state is the one sitting next to you in the morning when you come to, holding your hand, your protector. Oh, it's insidious. Uncle Sam is a serial killer. The son of Sam's got nothing on Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is the most prolific, psychopathic, diabolical, demonic mass murderer in history. I mean, look at that poster again, that Uncle Sam poster, that I Want You poster. Think about that. You would think that a character who's supposed to represent the great democratic America would actually be asking the people, what do you want? Not demanding, I want you to go off into the meat grinder of World War I and World War II. Over 500,000 American soldiers killed in Europe and in Asia, thousands of miles from the United States. And then basically some 20-something years later, the same message is repeated. And it's heralded as a great quote. It's heralded as a great statement from John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Why? That's not how this works.
Now, grand rising kings and queens from Africa and across the ocean, welcome back. Let me go direct to the commentary because I'm boiling from inside. I have some things to say. From this speech of Shahid Bolsen, I've learned something, listened carefully, and I love it. Especially coming from a white guy. Perfect. Now, black people in America don't know their history. They have been cut off from Africa and from what was done to them in America. But white people don't know their history either. No, this goes on and on, what Shahid Bolsen is saying. And this statement is more than just honest. It's a revolutionary. It is rare. And that's that we hear a white academic admit that the entire country, not just the oppressed, but the oppressors too, have been conditioned to forget. This isn't about ignorance alone. It's about weaponized ignorance. If you can make an entire people forget their greatness, you can convince them to settle for survival. And if you can make the oppressor forget their royalty, then they can continue it without consciousness. From the moment African people were kidnapped and enslaved, the colonizers worked to erase their connection to they worked so hard to erase that. The language were banned, African names were stolen and replaced with slaves' names, spiritual systems were demonized, and our royalty was replaced with chains. Black people royalty, African enslaved royalty was replaced with chains. I'll say this, when slavery ended, the erasure continued. Black children were taught that their history began in chains. Africa was portrayed as a continent of savages. Heroes like Queen Nziga, Mansa Musa, Marcus Garvey, Lumumba, they were excluded from education. Even Black History Month, it is important, but it is used to contain our story into just 28 days. The system gives us Martin Luther King, but won't tell you he condemned capitalism and imperialism. They teach Rosa Parks sat down, but won't say she was trained by radicals. And this is because if you remember who you are, you won't beg to sit at the table. You will build your own table. That's the reality. Now, Shahid Bolsen didn't just talk about black amnesia. He said white people don't know their own history either, and this is crucial. They are not taught that Europe was built on colonization. There's a video I played, there's a video I worked on it, where a white lady just discovered the history of white people, or the culture of white people is white supremacy and racism. And she just discovered how she wasn't taught about a number of things that white people built the country. Because they were never taught the reality. They were never taught that the modern wealth they are enjoying was stolen. They were never taught that slavery wasn't a flaw, it was the foundation. When they look at black poverty, or when they look at the black poverty and African nations still developing, they say, why don't they just work harder? That's what white people say. They think that we are working less. They think that we are not capable enough to work for ourselves. But it's a narrative put on them. Because they don't know that their ancestors destroyed African economies. You know? What they were taught is that America founded the freedom, or America is founded on freedom, a great empire. But they are not taught, or they didn't know that the first police were slave catchers, or the Constitution protected slavery. White amnesia allows white innocence, and that innocence lets them repeat historical crimes like mass incarceration, economic disparities or exploitation, and anti-migration policies like this, what's going on, without guilty. The IC raids, that's what we call anti-migration policies. So Shahid compared America to the movies Memento. I have explained to you the movies. If you have never seen it, it's where the main character can't remember anything. So just stuck in a circle of violence, repeating the same mistakes are hurting people with no idea why. And that's the America. Every few decades, it repeats the same crime with new names. Slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration. Same mistake, new names. Colonization, structural adjustment, neocolonialism. Segregation, redlining, gentrification. And each time the media say it is something new. That was the past, we have moved on. That's the media. But we haven't moved on. We have moved in circles, and they have erased the map on purpose. And there's a video, I don't know if I have it, but I look for it, where there's a lady trying to tell us how things are repeating itself. From Lincoln to Donald Trump, same thing, same faces, different clothes, different ties, and different hats, and different slogans. Amnesia isn't an accident, it's a weapon of the ruling class. Because when you forget, you can't resist. You forget that you are once a kings and queen. You forget that revolution is in your blood. You forget that Africa was a cradle of civilization, not just a victim of colonization. And for white people, forgetting means that they can't sleep at night while benefiting from centuries of exploitation. That's why history is either erased or whitewashed. When they control the narrative, they control the future. But when we take the narrative back as black people, we begin to reclaim not just our knowledge, but to reclaim even our power. The most dangerous thing to the system is a black person who remembers the glory of Africa before colonizers, remembers the resistance of Harriet Tubman and Biko Sankara, remembers the deceptions of white missionaries and colonizers, remember the betrayal of African leaders who sold out to the West, the puppets. When memory returns, so does clarity. When memory returns, so does unity. When memory returns, so does vision. And that's why they fight so hard against it. That's why they do not want our unity. Our unity will make us be composed. And when we are composed as black people, we gonna remember. But when we fight among each other, we cannot remember damn. They ban books, they criminalize black education, they fund destruction, they demonize Pan-Africanism. But family, you know what? They cannot stop the awakening that is already happening. We can't stop at remembering. We must organize, we must reclaim, and we must rebuild. We must teach real black history to our children, from the Nile to Nina Simone. We must support African-centered education and media. We must reconnect with the continent. Whether through visits, business, or solidarity, black Americans connect with the continent. When I talk about we, I'm talking about black Americans. Reconnect with the continent, Africa. Let's demand reparation, not just financially, but spiritually and educationally. So, as Africans, some of them do, let's hold those in power accountable, both white and black collaborators, because the return of memory should lead to the rise of liberation. Okay? And if you're a white person watching this video, you are ready to do more than just feel guilty, then understand this message. Your job isn't to lead, your job is to listen, learn, and leverage your privilege to dismantle this system. Okay? Let's learn your own history. Pick up to your own people. Don't accept applause and never center yourself. So, Shahid Bolsen showed courage, but he is the exception. The rest of you must rise. So, family, I say that this is bigger than one professor word. It's about the truth. It's about why they fear the black memory. You know, because when we remember, we rise. And when we rise, the system fails. So today, I challenge you, read this book. Let me remember. There's a book I want you to read. It's written by Amos Wilson or Walter Rodney. Okay? Teach your children the truth and share this video with someone who needs to wake up. And always remember, you are not what they told you you are. Until next episode, peace out.